So generally on the Embryo Adoption Podcast, we're sharing stories that turned out well in just about every respect. But we want to be very careful and transparent too, as we describe the ups and downs of embryo adoption, to cover absolutely every angle. And the truth is, not every story has the happy ending with the neat bow. And we need to talk about that. So that's what we're doing today. I'm Mark Mellinger, your host. This is the Embryo Adoption Podcast brought to you by the National Embryo Donation Center. And my guests today are Jared and Kristi Taylor. They have been gracious enough to go down this hard road with us here for today's episode. I can't thank you two enough for this. I think it's really important for people who either have gone through embryo adoption and have experienced some of the same feelings that you have, and people who are prospective embryo adoption families to know about this and hear about it. So it's really important. I want to start here, though. Why did embryo adoption initially pique your interest?
So we actually have three biological children first, and we went the route of oral fertility drugs with the first two. The last one was a total surprise. And then we just started pursuing traditional adoption. We looked into traditional adoption for a long, long time, a bunch of different agencies. Our fertility doctor actually recommended us for embryo adoption. And so I started looking into that. I was on board with it more before Jared was. So I just kind of waited for him to, catch up with me. I don't know, being pregnancy is a cool thing. It's a miraculous thing. And I think that was part of the draw, I think, to embryo adoption, because it's a neat thing to be able to have babies and your own babies, and how to, I don't know, take your prenatals, and how to do all the right things with it, and so that was a cool thing. Adoption has always been in our path, though.
Well, I think it gives a different perspective to the traditional adoption, because one, traditional adoption is very hard right now, and it's a business. And the other thing you get with traditional adoption is you don't for sure know what you're getting. Embryo adoption presented a path that felt like it was more in line with what our standards were of how we were living our own life, and gave us an opportunity to bring children that would be like us and that would have genetics like us, that were a little more, the environment was a little more controlled than just a wild card.
Definitely a more controlled environment. And you guys ended up being one of our favorite couples. You always had a story for us every time you came in the door, and we're always of such good humor. So it's just proof you don't have to have had NEDC kids through the NEDC, at least who survived outside the womb, to be part of the NEDC family, because Jared and Kristi, you very much are. Describe your experience with the NEDC.
We love you all. It's that's part of the frustrating thing about it all, is like, everything should have worked out, and then it all just became this massive, 2020 was not a good year, I think, for anybody. That's pretty much how I would sum it up. 2020 stank pretty bad.
Yeah, right.
So when we first matched with our first embryo donation family, we adored them. They even had the same names as us. Their babies looked like our babies. It was just meant to be. And so I think when we went in for that transfer, I was a little shocked. I think that was my biggest shock when it didn't work out, because everything was supposed to be, and it obviously wasn't. And then COVID started, and I was suddenly homeschooling our three children, and that was a disaster. And then we went in for our second transfer, and I remember, the week before we left to Tennessee, we were actually matched with a baby for this traditional agency we were working with, and we were so excited for that. We were still going to go to Tennessee, and we had this baby. And then the day that the mom was supposed to show up here in our state, she didn't come, and so then we didn't have that baby. And then we flew to Tennessee, and we landed. I turned my phone on, and I had this message from Dr. Keenan saying, "Hey, we've got something came up. I need you to call me. Here's my cell phone number." I thought, well, this is beautiful. And so we called him, and he said that they went to thaw out the embryos, and there wasn't any. He doesn't know what happened to them, and we could decide what we wanted to do, if we wanted to fly home or go for, what was it?
a backup set.
Right.
Yeah, it went for back. It was an anonymous transfer.
All these big words.
So we wouldn't have the information. We wouldn't have the couple that we had picked out. I believe with each one of them, we actually did Zooms with them. At least one of them, maybe two of them, we did Zooms prior to actually them accepting us.
Sure.
Which was an interesting thing of where they still had control. But these ones, yeah, we got that phone call and he goes, "This is the first time we've ever had it happen here. It's a surprise. We've heard of it only at one other time. This doesn't happen." And that night we went and we prayed about it, and because of COVID, we couldn't change our flight. It wasn't easy to do. And so we just got up the next morning and we thought, well, we'll just go in and see if any others come across our feeling that we think we should do. And we found one, and that one was actually successful.
Yeah, for a week, wasn't it?
For a week.
For a couple of days. And then I don't know what happened with that. I think one stopped growing and then the other one, I don't know, was it ectopic? I don't know. All I know was I was getting my blood drawn like every week for the next 2 months. So that was really fun. It was pleasant. I was good relationships with her for the longest.
Yep.
And then we went for a third transfer, and I think neither one of us had really high hopes with that. Then
the pessimism set in a little bit, but the staff at NEDC is just great. I mean, everybody there from the minute you walk in to the minute you leave, and through even the phone calls of the next couple of weeks, they take care of you and they care about you, and you do feel like it's a family and you want to be a part of it. And I think that's why we want to do this today too, is because even though we weren't successful in the way we wanted, we still hope we can still be a part. And we've had a few friends that have reached out to us wondering about it, and we've referred them over. And so as hard it is to possibly be a blessing to somebody else in their own life when you didn't get it to come through, we're hoping at least we can still be of some good.
Well, you certainly are by doing this, and you didn't have to do it. You weren't pressured into it. You wanted to do it. After prayerful consideration, and I really, really respect that. Take me to that moment, because others who go through embryo adoption have been there, or may be there. That moment when you realize the ultimate result was not going to be what you wanted, even though the vast, vast majority of couples who come through the NEDC for multiple transfers do have children. You reached the end of the line, and that wasn't going to be your result. What were your thoughts, and how did you grapple with that?
Well, I'd have to say ice cream is always like a good route to use. Chocolate, any of those. I think giving yourself grace and knowing whatever emotion you feel is fine and it's okay. And it doesn't matter. I don't think emotions are a bad thing. I think that they're perfect. I think you can let yourself have time to be angry and to be upset with how it should have been. And I don't know. What do you want to say to
it? I think part of it too came down, I mean, we're on the West Coast. We're not, it's not and there's not a direct flight we're in Salt Lake. There's not a direct flight into Knoxville for us. And so it's a few day event. And with our 3 kids, with their ages, it was taxing on them for us to go and be gone. And then they were a part of the journey too. We did not have any secrets from them. They knew what was going on. They knew that we were trying to do it, and they got excited about it. And you just come to it of you desire and you want it so bad, but sometimes what may have meant to be and whatever was in the plan, success from our eyes was not success from God's eyes. And unfortunately, he has to allow the things of earth to happen too. He's pretty good at allowing agency and the elements to take place.
Was that the hardest part, sharing the disappointment with the children?
No, not really. We have a little bit of disappointment in our family anyways. And so it just was like, oh, hey, guess what, guys? I think my hardest part was I thought for sure this is what God wanted us to do, and then it didn't work. And so I think my hardest part was being like, okay, well, I'll just write this down in my little memoirs, and then when I die, I'll have my book club chat with God and be like, hey, I'd really like to discuss these chapters because what the heck? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think that is what I'm waiting for, because I don't think it will make sense on earth. It doesn't. And nobody can say anything that will make sense because it doesn't. And so I think that is just where that is. It's just in my little memoirs, and I will wait until I am dead.
I'll add, from the husband's perspective, it's really a helpless spot to be, because you have no control over anything. You can give your opinion, you can give advice, but I mean, pregnancy brings along its own set of mindset, and you have to watch your wife go through and prepare to become pregnant. And I mean, it's IVF transfer, so there's a lot of hormones that are injected, and you go through a lot of that, and the emotions are real, and it's a difficult spot to try to be supportive and move through it and help everybody just keep going forward.
Are you still glad you adopted embryos?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so, because even though we don't have a connection with those individuals anymore, I think when we get to the next side, we still will have a connection. And I think our sphere of people have grown, and it definitely, if nothing else, we learned some things. As Kristi said, it's not necessarily some things we particularly wanted to learn or would ever want anybody to have to go through, because it challenges you as to whether you feel like you succeeded in life or not. But I think it's definitely been an experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, and my devotion last night was a Tim Keller reading on Job, and it was really speaking to what you both have said. Sometimes when we suffer and it seems to make no earthly sense, we're going through the same thing that Job went through. God never revealed the reason to him of his suffering. At least it's not recorded in the book of Job. But he did have a purpose. He did have a plan. Job just didn't see the plan. And that's where you two are right now when it comes to embryo adoption. And that's where we all are through various struggles and trials in our lives, right? These things that seem to be like, why would this not work? What the heck? What's going on? But at least we have that assurance of knowing there is a plan. And we'll know someday, like you said, Kristi, but we don't see the plan now. We just have to put our trust in the fact that someday we will. I want the two of you.
If you look at the NEDC success rate, I mean, from our first transfer to the third transfer, the organization's success rate shot. Like, if I remember right, it went from, like, on the first one, I remember asking Dr. Keenan, what are our odds? And he basically said, flip a coin. Mm-hmm. That's about where we're at right now. And from after that third one and even to now, it looks like it's more in the 70 to 80%.
Depending upon the cycle. Now we have had many that have had that success rate. Not everyone does. You still have your more around 50%. And I think we've had even one or two that were lower. So yeah, we never. One thing I like about working here is we never want to embellish our press clippings. We want to be honest and straight shooters with people. You are right, Jared. The vast majority of our cycles, it seems like the rates have only gone up over the past couple of years. But not all of them are that way. It's certainly not a guarantee. But yeah, I know what you're saying. It increases the frustration, right?
It does.
What would you say? Okay, talk to somebody who is just going in on the front end of embryo adoption. When couples are doing this, understandably, and there's validity to this, that they're excited, they're dreaming and hoping and thinking of the possibilities of having children. But what would you say to someone who's just on the front end? Is this possibility something they need to keep in the back of their mind the whole way? What would you two advise?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that, well, I don't know. I don't want to live my life waiting for the worst thing to happen. I mean, I don't want to, every time I sit down to eat, think I'm going to get food poisoning, or get in your car and today's the day I'm going to get in a wreck. It's possible. It's probably going to happen, but I don't want to live my life like that. And pregnancy is an exciting thing. And I think you should be excited for it. And I think that have a positive attitude about it. And if it doesn't work, I mean, ice cream again is always helpful. Could put some plugs in and see if we get endorsed. I think it's always good to choose good and to choose happiness, but also to give yourself grace for whatever emotion does come your way.
I agree the same way. Yeah. I mean, she uses some of the same references we use. Car wrecks happen all the time. Bad things happen. But in the reality is, if you're a couple that's coming to NEDC or that you're looking at adoption, you've probably been on a pretty rough road anyway. Adoption's not usually anybody's first choice. You always want it to work, and luckily we had 3 biological kids, but then we weren't able to have any more. So that's why, and we just felt prompted that adoption was part of it. And so that's why we just felt that we should continue to look. You can never know something if you don't go for it. And if you've been put on the path to even explore the NEDC, there's probably some powers behind it. And it's not something you should go in just thinking it's going to be a perfect road. I mean, I'm sure you guys have the success stories that they come in, they have their first initial consult, everything looks great. They come back for the next visit, it works. And then their kids are born perfectly at 40 weeks and there's not any complications. But that's just not how life works the majority of the time. And if you're on the front of it, go for it. What's the worst that can happen is not the worst thing ever. Everything's overcomable.
Yeah, well said. How has going through embryo adoption affected your relationships with each other, your kids and family, and your faith?
Well, I actually had fun going to Tennessee with just Jared. It was like our little kid-free, vacations. We talk about the different places we used to go eat, and that was fun. I think that it's helped our kids see that hard things happen to everybody. So I think that they've grown a lot. I mean, they were just little when we were all doing all these different things. And I think it helps them have compassion for other people when they're having hard things happen to them, because they realize, oh yeah, it does happen, but we can get through it. I'm still waiting on my book club chat with God. And so I think there's some parts that are really good and some parts that I just don't even address yet there. How is your relationships?
I think it definitely took us to a different level that we had to be to. It was a blast. I mean, why in Knoxville? Make sure you go to Calhoun's. They have the best fillets there are, and
best ribs in the USA. Says it right on the sign.
Yep. And it was great, and we loved it. We kind of had our little routine that we got into, and I mean, unfortunately, we did have to go 4 times. And we talked to Dr. King, and we probably could have done some things to have one more shot, but it just didn't feel like it was the right thing for us to do at that point. But it definitely it pushed our relationship to different limits, and it makes it so that other things that come up in normal day-to-day sure are minuscule compared to some of the stresses that we went through with that. And we've now we end up getting into foster care, and we adopted 2 little boys, and I think it's made us appreciate those kids just a little bit more.
Well, and talk about that journey. I mean, that's where I wanted to end it, and I think that's what everybody who's listening to this is going to wonder. What was your family building journey totally over after being done with embryo adoption? And you're saying, no, we were still about helping the most vulnerable. We're going into the foster care system.
Well, I was ready to call it quits, but it felt like, no, we just keep going. So we renewed our home study again. And we had with another agency, and we had the whole mess of situations with traditional adoption. And then probably 7 months later, I was telling Jared, I was like, let's just look into foster care. I don't want to adopt from foster care, but we have a lot to offer, and our kids had a lot to offer. And so we got certified really quickly. And we started getting all these phone calls from caseworkers, and Jared and I looked at each other like, what are we doing? This is really, really heavy stuff. And so we,
including we had a traditional adoption.
Oh, I forgot about that one that fell through too.
That we were actually on our way to the airport. And the difficult part about traditional adoption is, like I had said earlier, it's a business. And on our way, we got a phone call that the birth mom's mom had gotten involved, and she wanted money. She didn't care about anything else, and she put a demand out for some money, and we turned around and came back home and walked away from it. And
about that one.
And about 2 weeks later, we were matched with 2 little boys that we ultimately ended up adopting. Now, granted, as Kristi had said, when we started embryo adoption, it took me a long time to get on board. And this time she told me, hey, we should try foster care. I was a quick, hard no, because we had pretty well told God that we were done. We had come to the limits. We couldn't take the stress with our kids. Our youngest, I think, was 5 when we started all this, or 4. Our oldest was 7 or 8. And so I was a pretty well set no, and we prayed about it, and we told him, no, this is not it. And he very clearly answered back that we were to do something. And I think we were one of the fastest approvals in the state for foster care. And it went very quick. And then
these little boys were looking for their home too. And the funny thing about it is they look exactly like Jared. So the ones that I bear look like Jared. The ones that we adopt look like Jared. His genes are very, very strong in this place. So now we have 5 kids, and I drive a Suburban, and there's no more. So it's sweet. It's sweet.
How old were your foster adoptive children when you adopted them? How old is everybody now in the family?
So we've had them for a year. Our oldest daughter, she's 11 and a half. And then we have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. Is Lincoln 7? Yes. And then the ones we just adopted, our older one just turned 5, and then the baby's a year and a half.
Oh, wow. So still a baby in the house as well. Now,
it's crazy. Yes.
Wow. 1.5 to 9.5. But that's a great, joyous home of 7, and 5 of them kids. That's awesome. So now is your family building journey done, or do you know?
I mean, our foster friends joke with us that I could drive like a 12-passenger van, and I probably could, but I don't think I want to. But also, knowing us, I mean, we can't ever say this is how it's going to go, because then somebody just laughs and says, no, it's not. And so I just tread lightly with what we say is going to happen in the future. Our daughter has 4 brothers, and she really, really, really wants a sister. That's nice. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I feel so old and so tired and so happy. And we have 5 kids, and we've reset to a baby again. And so I think that, I don't know. I don't know what the future is. I'm sure it'll be good. I'm sure it'll be busy and messy, but
one thing in our life is we've never set specific locked-in goals. We have our ultimate goals of we plan to be married for time and for all eternity. We want our family to be healthy, but we don't ever lock in, this is the only way it's going to go for us. And that's how we were able to come upon the NEDC, is because we've kept our life flexible and open. That's how we've also adopted these 2 kids out of foster care, because we've allowed ourselves to stay instruments in God's hands. Because the minute you start saying yes or no, I mean, when we first got married and we start talking about how many kids do we want, I came from a family of 4, Kristi's a family of 5. For a while, 3 kids looked really great. A few late nights lately with a baby screaming a lot. Good. 3 kids really seemed like a really good idea again. And like I say, our kids are well traveled. They've flown a ton. In fact, it's unfortunate, but all 3 of our kids actually are medallion members on Delta, because we like to travel so much. But now we've got 2 extra kids that it's a little bit more work, but it's been great. We talk about it all the time. If we only had 3, maybe we'd do this, but at the same time, then Like when I came home to prepare for this tonight or today, our 4-year-old or our 5-year-old came and jumps in your arms and just gives you a daddy, I love you so much. And it just puts you into this is what we're supposed to do. And so if somebody's sitting out there on the fence and NEDC wasn't in your plans, go for it.
It's priceless. Well, I love that your happy ending. It may not have come with us, but it did come, and you have your children that you're supposed to have. Asterisk maybe more, but happy ending for now, and I love that. And again, I'm so thankful to you too for sharing this hard part of your journey. It's going to help so many people. And we also want to thank all of you for listening. If you want to find out more about the National Embryo Donation Center, just go to our website. It's embryodonation.org, embryodonation.org. I'm Mark Mellinger, and this has been the Embryo Adoption Podcast.